Buenos días a toda la comunidad universitaria y a la comunidad de CUCEA que nos sigue a través de la plataforma de Facebook Live. El Centro Universitario de Ciencias Económico Administrativas, a través del doctorado en Estudios Económicos, la Maestría en Economía y el Centro de Investigación de Teoría Económica, le dan la más cordial bienvenida a este webinar, The Mediating Role of Urbanization and the Composition of Happiness. Y bien, para dar inicio formal, me permito saludar a las distinguidas personalidades que nos acompañan. Agradecemos al doctor Alessandro Tampieri. Él es profesor de la University of Florence. Y como moderador en este evento nos acompaña el doctor Jorge Villaseñor Becerra. Él es el coordinador de la Maestría en Economía. Reiteramos el saludo a todos ustedes y les anunciamos que pueden consultar en webinars.cucea.udg.mx los seminarios llevados a cabo y próximos a emitirse. Ahora bien, dejo el uso de la voz al doctor Jorge Villaseñor Becerra y coordinador de la Maestría en Economía.
Buenos días a todos. Una disculpa por esto, el micrófono estaba en mute. Es para nosotros un honor tener al doctor Alessandro Tampieri, ¿sí? Y a ustedes y el favor de su atención en una edición más del seminario de investigación que coordina el doctorado en Estudios Económicos y la Maestría en Economía de la Universidad de Guadalajara. Para el día de hoy, el doctor Tampieri va a hablar sobre el rol de mediación de la urbanización en la composición de la felicidad de los individuos o de las sociedades. ¿Sí? Es un tema muy interesante de microeconomía aplicada, el cual es bastante innovador porque combina política pública de innovación en urbanización con análisis microeconómico. Para mí es realmente un honor estar aquí presentando a mi gran amigo, el doctor Alessandro Tampieri. Él, como pequeño resumen curricular, el cual pues no hace justicia a su larga carrera. Pero bueno, él tiene un doctorado en economía por la Universidad de Leicester en el Reino Unido y actualmente es profesor en el Departamento de Economía y Negocios de la Universidad de Florencia en Italia. También es un asistente o digamos, un investigador adjunto en la Universidad de Luxemburgo. Entre sus logros y sus puestos, él ha sido profesor, ¿sí? En la Universidad de Greenwich, en el Reino Unido, y también tuvo estancias postdoctorales en la Universidad de Luxemburgo y Bolonia. Y ha sido profesor y, digamos, ha impartido clases en la Universidad de Syracuse, en los Estados Unidos, en la Johns Hopkins University en Estados Unidos y en el New York College. Los intereses de investigación del doctor Tampieri pues son en microeconomía aplicada y teoría de juegos. Es para mí entonces un placer presentar al doctor Alessandro Tampieri. Ale, thank you very much for being with us. It's truly an honor, my friend, for you to be here. And well, now it's up to you to tell us about the mediating role of urbanization in the composition of happiness. Thank you very much, Ale.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you for your invitation. I'm honored to be hosted by your university, Universidad de Guadalajara. Me and Professor Villaseñor were together in England now more than 10 years ago, and we both have hair on that period, and we share beautiful memories together. I will start by sharing my slides on the topic of the presentation, which is the title, the mediating role of urbanization on the composition of happiness. Together, this work is with Cristina Bernini from University of Bologna. And so let's start with the presentation. So the presentation, the paper is about happiness. Okay, so the analysis of happiness in economics. So what we try to see is how in particular, urbanization might affect happiness. Urbanization has increased over the past 70 years. In 1950, the 30% of world population was a urban population. In 2014, it was 54%. It's expected to rise further to 66% for 2050. Albeit, I might add that the recent events might have changed this trend somehow because many jobs do not necessitate to be done in metropolis anymore. So this might expect some change in once a job might be done in smart working. The employee doesn't need anymore to be to live in a metropolis, and this might have many effects. For instance, in house pricing, and it might change this trend somehow. But this is just my expectation, and we will see what will happen about that. The analysis of the relationship between happiness and urbanization is not a novelty. Okay, there is it started now decades ago, and there is an empirical regularities in this relationship, which is usually negative. I have to specify something. All over the presentation, I will talk about happiness or subjective well-being, because happiness is usually measured by questions about satisfaction. So how are you satisfied about your life? How are you satisfied about your job? And questions like that. So questions about satisfaction. And it is a standard in the literature to use the terms happiness or subjective well-being interchangeably. So I'm gonna stick to that. So I might use either subjective well-being or SWB or happiness. So this relationship, we said that there is these empirical regularities, and it is based on framework that set aside the interaction with the specific domains of happiness. So happiness, overall happiness, is expected to be determined by the happiness that the individual have on specific life domains. Okay, so like your happiness with your job, your happiness with your family, the happiness with your the environment, the happiness with your friends, and so on. Okay, and so the overall happiness that you get is somehow the composition is somehow due to the specific happiness that you get in different aspects of life, in different domains of life. So our approach to urbanization is that urbanization might change the composition of happiness in the sense that it might change the weights that different domains have. Different domains of happiness might explain overall happiness. So I'm going to make an example to clarify what I want to say. Consider, for instance, a simple setting where with a city and a countryside. We might expect that the countryside is better for its environmental features. So environmentally speaking, the countryside is better, but maybe the city might have more job opportunities, and so people tend to move to the city for that. And so we might expect that the overall happiness of an individual is more due to the environment if the individual lives in the countryside rather than he lives in the city. And for the same reason, if we might expect that the overall happiness of an individual is mainly due to the economic opportunities, the economic conditions, if the individual lives in the cities rather than in the countryside. Okay, so what we want to investigate is how the share of the happiness domain, the share of the aspects of life that determine happiness change according to the degree of urbanization. Okay, according to whether the individual lives in an urban or a rural area. Okay, so this is mainly the point that we're going to do in the paper. In order to do that, we're going to employ, from a methodological perspective, an instrument called happiness function, which is a standard instrument to the analysis of happiness, which is simply a relationship between overall happiness and happiness domains. So the relationship between the fact that overall happiness is explained by happiness domains. This instrument has been barely adopted in regional analysis. To the best of my knowledge, I'm the only one who already adopted this in another published work, again with Cristina Bernini, so it is in the same project. But it has never been applied in the analysis of urbanization. The use of these instruments that assumes the relationship between overall happiness and happiness domains allows to use to explain, to investigate whether this mediating role of urbanization actually exists. So if actually urbanization changed the composition of the overall happiness, the way to explain overall happiness. So in this paper, the preliminary question is a simpler question. So if there is a direct effect of urbanization on both overall well-being, so on overall happiness, or on each happiness domain. The first question is the common question in the literature. We were going to see soon an overview of the literature. And so this is the classical question of the literature. And it is necessary to verify if this direct effect exists in order to, if it makes sense then to verify a mediating role, okay? If you do not have any direct effect, it is unlikely to expect any mediating role. And in addition, we check for the relationship, a direct effect between urbanization and each happiness domain specifically. So this is actually a preliminary exercise to motivate our main analysis, which is, again, to investigate the existence of this mediating role of urbanization. And so, as a consequence, if there is an indirect effect on relative weights of happiness domains. So I'm going to move to give you an idea of the literature, starting with the broader literature, the more general one. So starting with the relationship between for the usual variable that explain happiness. Okay, so there are usually three types of variable that determine happiness: individual variables, macroeconomic variables, and institutional variables. The classic three macroeconomic variables analyzed are the GDP, unemployment and inflation, and inequality. In the recent years, starting from about 20 years ago, urbanization has been considered a new important macro variable to explain happiness. So we now focus more specifically on the literature between urbanization and happiness. The first papers, the early papers on this, consider urbanization only as a socio-demographic measure. So where the point of the paper was something else. Okay. So this has been analyzed in papers of economics of transition. So the transition from ex-communist European countries to free market countries, and in this analysis, they wanted to investigate the change in happiness, and the urbanization was just another control variable. So the point of the paper was not the main interest was not the looking at the relationship with urbanization. So in some of this in this work, they found a negative relationship, and in some work, the urbanization didn't have a significant role, so it didn't impact on happiness. Okay, so but when there was an effect, this was negative. Okay. Later on, the urbanization became a key indicator to explain happiness, and in this the papers listed here, the focus was China, where urbanization was measured using a urban-rural dumping variable, or in Ireland. And finally, SORES in 2014 look on urbanization in the EU. All these papers show a negative relationship between urbanization and happiness. So there is this regularities that comes up. More recent works try to look at more nuanced questions about this relationship. For instance, an interesting paper of Lenzi and Perrucca analyzed the proximity of rural areas to cities of different size. And this is because we might expect some spillover from the cities to the rural area. So it might kind of affect the level of happiness. Another contribution of Requina looks at the link between urbanization and happiness by controlling the level of country development. And further contributions consider the different measures of urbanization, such as density instead of rural-urban dummies, or population size. Finally, the paper is related to the literature on subjective well-being and geographical environmental factors. These works are not interested specifically on urbanization, but just investigate how specific environmental aspects of the environment where of the society where an individual lives, or specific geographical feature might affect happiness. So our paper is tangential to this literature, but is still somehow relevant. So the type of investigations are the effect of airport noise, environmental quality, air quality, or spatial equilibrium, where spatial equilibrium is a theoretical approach to verify whether individuals are actually moving from if the specific context of a society is kind of stable, or if there are movements. And in order to, since theoretically you consider you focused on utility, and you might try kind of measure utility using subjective well-being. If you are happy, if you're not happy, you might move, and so you can use this type of empirical analysis to test the presence of spatial equilibrium or not. Okay, so we can move to the our specific contribution, starting with the data set. We are going to use a data set called Aspects of Daily Life, which is provided by the Italian Office of Statistics. So we are going to use Italian data. Okay, this sample is a large repeated cross-section and covers the resident population in private household. There are this data set provides information about individual happiness and a lot of socio-demo characteristics. We have about 150,000 observations over the years 2010-2013. This data set is actually extended for 3 more years, but there with much less information on urbanization. So we decided to keep the original size of the data set to have more information. Oops, I just may go backward. Okay, so we have a measure of life satisfaction, and we have measures of satisfaction domains. Okay, so the questions are about the satisfaction in overall life over specific aspects of life. Okay, so the question is, at this moment, how much are you satisfied with your life overall? Okay, and this measure life satisfaction, overall satisfaction. This question is measured on a Likert scale from 0 to 10. Whereas the satisfaction for the specific life domains, it's a 4-point Likert scale. So we have from 0 to 4. From 1 to 4. So the specific life domains that we have are economic conditions, health, relationship with family, relationship with friends, spare time, environment, and job. Now, of course, necessarily, the more information the more information we have about satisfaction domain, and the better is. Okay, so of course we are restricted in our analysis by the data set that we use. So this data set provides a lot of information on quite relevant life domains. So we might think maybe more, but still we are we are bounded by the information that we get from the dataset. So we chose this dataset because compared to others had more information. About the regional information, the HADL has about regional information. We have 2 measures. We have the region of residence and we have the population of the council of residence. So we do not truly know where which council the individual lives, but we know the size of the council. Okay, it is categorized in 5 size dimensions, from 1 if the council has less than 2,000 inhabitants to 5 to metropolitan areas like Milan, Rome, and so on. So in the literature, there is not a general consensus about the measure of urbanization. And in addition, there is no general consensus on the definition of what is the how to split the rural area to urban area. Okay, so according to the paper you read, you see different approaches. We follow the approach used by the Rubertis for Italy, according to which the rural areas are considered those councils with less than 10,000 inhabitants, and urban all the rest. So we're going to use this measure of urbanization. And then we're going to also employ the measure, the information about the region. But we are going to explain later in which way. Okay, so we're going to use also this, the measure, the region of residence, but later on I'll explain the way we're going to use it. So we can have a quick look on the descriptive statistics. We might see that life satisfaction as generally people answer positively on average on this question. We have information, we have kept information about the sex, the age, using age bands, dummies, the presence of children, and the years of children, other demographic information, whether the individual is separated or divorced, if it's widowed. We use the measure about education, about whether the individual has or not higher education. The HADL does not provide any information about income. Okay, so this could not be considered a problem if we consider that the measure of higher education, it is usually used as a proxy of the level of income. So it might be good just have the measure of education that embeds the information of income. Whereas if you have both, you might have some correlation with the two. We further had occupational dummies, so whether the individual is employed, retired. And also we use this job satisfaction respondents, which just say us whether individuals answered the question of job satisfaction. Why we are including this this question, and the reason is you're gonna look, you're gonna see the reason quickly. So as you can see, we have not so many information about satisfaction with job. Okay, so in order to use the entire sample without losing the individual who didn't answer to this question, this dummy helps us in that, because we can keep all the observations that didn't answer the question. They just didn't answer to the question. So we do not lose this observation. They just do not enter when this variable works. Okay, so instead of using a 84 and something thousand observation, we might use almost 150. So all of these are the observation. The questions about economic condition, health status, family, friends, and spare time. We might see the questions are kind of on the sits a bit above the middle of the scale 1 to 4. Then the measure of urbanization is built the way we have shown, and I have shown in a few slides earlier. That is, it's yes if the council of residence is more than 10,000 or 0 otherwise. Another relevant aspects of the descriptive statistics is in this table that shows the share of Italian councils by regions. Okay, I haven't spelled bad council, but this should be council. So you might see that this is not uniform. Okay, and so accordingly, we decided to use multi-level analysis with the regions as second level. So basically, we nest according to the region the observation in clusters, so that accordingly we use the information of region of residence in this way. So as a second level in the econometric model, I'm going to show in details what we are going to do with that. So what is our research method? So the preliminary task, I kind of anticipate this. It's the analysis of the direct effect of urbanization on the single happiness domain and overall happiness. Then we go with the main analysis, the analysis of happiness function to relate domains with overall happiness through urbanization. And we finally look at the methodological issues and how we dealt with them. Okay, so this is the part of the presentation. So we start with the direct effect of urbanization by simply look at any happiness domain and overall satisfaction, overall happiness as a function of urbanization. If this exercise shows that there is actually a direct effect of urbanization, we might also expect that it makes sense to look for a mediating role. Okay, so our assumption is just, as I said, that either any of the happiness domains and overall happiness are a function of urbanization. Okay, so this O just represents, according to on separate regression, we're going to verify the this relationship very simply, and we're going to assume that this relationship is Cobb-Douglas, so that there is this kind of shape. We, in this way, alpha U represents the marginal effect of urbanization. We log linearize this relationship and we add some socio-demographic dummies. So we get this equation to test. But we also, as I said, we are considering this in order to consider the difference among regions, the variability among regions. We are going to transform this equation in order to take into account on the specific features of region. And we do so by using a multi-level model. Okay, in this type of model, we are going to include the region of residence as the second level in the multi-level analysis. This choice is motivated by the table that I shown earlier, the fact that the share of council with less than 10,000 inhabitants is very different according to the region. So it is relevant to take into account regional differences. This approach, it is quite common, so it is not there's no news in the regional analysis on satisfaction. So it is being applied in several contributions. These contributions on the first bullet do not focus on urbanization, whereas this last use this approach on the specific focus on the relationship between urbanization and happiness. So this way to proceed is quite standard, and it is motivated by our data set. Our data tell us that it is a good idea to employ this model. So, having said that, we are going to modify our equation by taking into account the random intercept according to the region. Okay, so we have this is the original equation where the error is idiosyncratic for any observation, but the intercept now, it's actually, there is a random component that is specific for any region. Okay, so this model takes into account the random intercept. Okay, so in this way, this model allows us to consider in the analysis the specific variation according to the region. Okay, so the variability of the region. Okay, so this is the preliminary analysis. Okay, once we verify this, we are going to look on the core of the paper, that is the happiness function. The happiness function is a standard method to analyze happiness. First, in the literature, in the psychology literature, because the analysis of happiness starts first in the psychology literature, and then in the economics of happiness later. Okay, so as I said in words earlier, the happiness function just represents a relationship between overall happiness, age, and the specific happiness domain. So overall happiness explained by the happiness on the specific aspects of life. We again take into account, we're going to use Cobb-Douglas. This is even better than before. It gives, there are it's a good idea to use a Cobb-Douglas because thanks to this approach, we can take into account the substitutability among the happiness domains through the elasticity of domain. So when we are going to get our results, our coefficient tells us also information about the substitutability. So it's a good model to, in particular, when you use an happiness function where you want to see how the composition of happiness depending on the specific happiness domains. We do the same procedures as before. We're going to log linearize our function by getting a log linearized version, and in which we include the socio-demographic dummies, and in addition here the urban dummy. Okay, so this is the first transformation that we do, but we are going to. This is just an intermediate version of the equation that we actually are going to estimate. Okay, so here we have the intercept, here we have the set of happiness domains, here we have the socio-demographic, and here we have our urbanization dummy. And here, of course, we have the idiosyncratic error. So why I'm saying that this is a intermediate equation, because what we actually want to look at is the urbanization, how this might explain the relationship between this, the happiness function, and the specific domains. So in order to do so, we employ the approach of the multi-level analysis by including the second level mean effects at the regional level. So we do the same thing that we did for the equation for the direct effect of urbanization, but we also look in this case to the random variation in the slopes of the satisfaction domain. Okay, and we are going to consider, in order to catch the mediating role of urbanization, we are going to include urbanization in the random slope of each domain. Okay, so this is the interesting bit of our approach. So this is what we are considering. This Y represents overall happiness as a function of, again, the intercept, happiness domains, socio-demographic, and the error. Like in the analysis for the direct effect, we have a random intercept, so we are considering the variability within the region. Okay, and in addition, since we are interested in investigate the mediating role, we are going to consider within the slopes, the random slope, we are going to consider urbanization. So the measure of urbanization is going to tell the relationship between the specific happiness domain, each specific happiness domains, and the overall happiness. And again, using the properties, the features of the multi-level analysis, we're going to consider random slope. So we're going to consider the variability of the slope according to region. So this is what is in multi-level analysis called level 1, and whereas this two equation represents level 2. Okay, so this is what we want to do. There are, of course, estimation problems. There are limitations, and we need to overcome some of these in the final estimation. So the first problem is that the level 1 explanatory variable could be correlated with the cluster means. Okay, so in order to solve this, so the cluster means, so here we might have a correlation between these bits. In order to solve this, the technical solution is to use, instead to use the covariate directly, so in specific happiness domains, we're going to use the mean-centered level 1 covariates as instrumental variable, okay? And this, in this way, we solve the correlation between the explanatory variable and the cluster mean. The second problem is the fact that cross-sectional data at different levels of aggregation, level 1 and level 2, might cause endogeneity. A way to intervene is to consider first to erase residual correlation by adding the group means of the regression. So we're going to add in the equation the mean across regions, okay, the of each happiness domain. In addition, we're going to check for endogeneity through specific tests at the level 2 and level 1. So endogeneity in a multi-level analysis with more than one level, it might occur to any level. Okay, so we need to check for endogeneity at any specific level. I'm not going through the technicalities on how to so how this, okay, the Hausmann test is the standard Hausmann test that everybody knows. The Van Praag procedures, it's a more specific, and to be honest, my co-author is a statistician and she dealt with that. And so I'm not getting into details to get this. So we are going just to test for these issues. As a consequence of that, this is the final equation that we are going to estimate. Okay, so we are going to consider not directly the measure of the satisfaction domains, but the mean centered by regional mean. And we are going to consider in the random intercept, we are going to consider also the mean of the regional mean for any happiness domain. And this remains like in the previous version of the equation. We're going to consider urbanization here to represent to explain the weight between the relationship between overall happiness and specific life domains. Okay, so I'm going on by looking at our results. And so we start with the preliminary results on the direct effect of urbanization. I just highlighted here, there are a lot of covariates. I would like just to, don't want to, bug you too much. And so I would like just to focus on the relationship between the happiness and the urbanization, we have in the first column overall happiness, then we have happiness with economic condition, with health, and with job. And then we have the other in the next table. So we might see the relationship is always negative and significant for any happiness domains. We might also see, which even in this, here we have environment, satisfaction with the environment, satisfaction with family, satisfaction with friends, satisfaction with spare time. The relationship is always negative. The only case in which it's not significant is satisfaction with spare time. You might notice, though, that the marginal effect is much different in some cases, in particular in environment. So the environment, the estimated coefficient, it's very high compared to, for instance, overall satisfaction. So you might see that the impact on specific happiness domain is stronger, but still it's negatively related to any life domains. Okay, so the basically this analysis confirms the well-known empirical regularity that I shown you at the beginning of the presentation. So we know that even in our results are consistent with the results that you find in the literature, which is good. Okay, so this slide just says that. So the relationship between overall happiness is negative and significant, and this is consistent with the existing literature. Urbanization is negatively related with each happiness domain apart from spare time. But the marginal effects on satisfaction differs across life domains. In particular, it's highly affect the satisfaction with the environment. It is negligible with respect to health. If you look at that, the marginal effect is extremely low. It's almost not relevant. It's still negative, but not very strong. So it kind of change. In this case, it's much higher. The environment is the much higher. So our preliminary results tells us that there actually exists a direct effect of urbanization, not only on overall happiness, but also on any specific life domains. So now we can move on the main analysis. So here we have a lot of information. We have here the mean-centered variables, okay, which represents the life domains but mean-centered with respect to overall satisfaction. So this is the results on the happiness function. So the dependent variable, there we have one independent variable, which is overall satisfaction. And here the specific life domains becomes the covariates, and here are analyzed mean-centered. Here are analyzed with the regional mean variables. So we have all of the life domains are positively related to overall satisfaction, which is good. So this indicates that our identification strategy was a good idea. The fact that clearly the happiness domains explain overall satisfaction. Here this specific block explains instead the mediating role of urbanization, which is our the point that is more interesting for us. And so this each of these line represents the urbanization and the weight of urbanization between the specific life domains, and overall satisfaction. Okay. Finally, this block represents the variances by region. Okay, so this is the estimation of variances to determine the variability of regions and to verify whether even then again, if actually exists a variability of region, and so if the choice of using multi-level analysis was a good one. In the last block, we just have the statistical test. So going a bit here on the block of satisfaction domains, we might see that the overall satisfaction is mainly explained by health. It's the marginal effect is the highest, followed by the satisfaction with economic condition and family, job satisfaction and family. Satisfaction with friends, spare time, and environment is still, all of these are significant, but they have a weaker impact on overall satisfaction. I'm not going to discuss the regional, the average effect. They are less stronger, and the role played by this was more to correct for endogeneity. So I'm not going to check for this. And I'm going to focus now on the main point of the paper, so the mediating role of urbanization. And interestingly, we see that the level of urbanization is urbanization increases the weight of the importance of satisfaction with the economic conditions on overall satisfaction. So the fact that these are significant entails that urbanization actually has a mediating role, but not just that. Interestingly, the sign of the urbanization change according to any specific. So it's going to raise some life domains in its weight to explain overall happiness, and it's going to reduce some other life domains. So we have a positive coefficient for the urbanization for the coefficient of economic satisfaction, family, and also we have job satisfaction is not significant. It is positive but not significant. We might expect that a possible reason could be that the effect of job is already being caused by the economic conditions. So with the increase in urbanization, increases the weight that economic conditions and the family explain overall satisfaction. Okay, this first result is intuitive. You might expect that. You might expect that if you live in a big city, your happiness is probably more due to your economic condition than if you live in the countryside, because of the larger job opportunities that you can get in a metropolis, in a metropolitan area. Where what is less intuitive, it's with respect to family. Okay, this is harder to interpret. By contrast, we might see that the increase in urbanization leads to less weight at explaining overall happiness of satisfaction with health, satisfaction with friends, and satisfaction with the environment. This is clearly the most expected result. I use this as an example, not because I knew that I had actually in the results, but because it's what one might immediately expect from to to understand our story. Also, the satisfaction with health might be due to the fact that a larger city with higher density of population, for instance, epidemiological viruses might spread more largely, and generally one might expect to be less happy in terms of health. Satisfaction with friends has a lower weight. Even in this case, like in the case of family, I'm less certain about possible interpretation of this result. So going on and looking at the results, or by looking at the variances by region, we'll see that both the constant, so the average, and any satisfaction domain are all significant. Okay, we see that the coefficients are extremely small, but this is normal considering that these numbers were small, so you might expect an extremely low variances. But the fact that it's significant is sufficient to tell that the variability across region matters, and that there are aspects that are not included in the current analysis, idiosyncratic features of the region, social features, amenities, or economic features that explain, that determine some degree of variability, and that we cannot get from the data that we got here. The statistical test show that the analysis is fine, so they work. So all over these slides, I'm just going to say what I already commented looking at the figure. So the satisfaction domains are positively and significantly related to overall satisfaction. So this means that the happiness function seems a good identification strategy for overall subjective well-being. There are most relevant aspects that our health condition is the most relevant aspect, then followed by economic conditions of satisfaction, and then satisfaction with family. Urbanization has contrasting effect on overall happiness, so it affects in a different way the different life domains. In particular, the role of satisfaction for economic conditions increases with urbanization, as well as the family. This result is less intuitive. We know that urbanization brings about different fertility choice, different family size, so it has an effect on the behavior of individual in terms of the family composition, and this in turn might change the relationship of an individual with his family. It might be that the urban life makes individual evaluate more the time spent with family members. Here I'm just giving interpretation, so I'm not. I'm just giving a possible reading of these results. Health and environment, as expected, are related, negatively related, so their weight falls with urbanization. Satisfaction with friends is negatively related, and the spare time satisfaction is not. Urbanization does not mediate for spare time satisfaction. So thanks to the multi-level analysis, we have checked for regional variation, and we got both variability in the intercept and in the slopes, so that there is other aspects that are not included in the analysis to influence happiness. So this again implies that it was appropriate to use this type of econometric model. So very quickly, the model satisfies all the tests, implying the robustness of our estimates, and we accept the null hypothesis of non-endogeneity, and also at level 2, we do not have endogeneity. So just to conclude, we have analyzed the mediating role of urbanization to explain the composition of happiness. Okay, to do so, we have exploited a happiness function augmented with a measure of urbanization that mediates between domains and overall happiness. So the measure of urbanization enters the relationship between life domains and overall happiness. And we also included regional effects. In line with the literature, overall happiness declines with urbanization, as well as specific life domains, whereas urbanization influences which domains of satisfaction affect more overall happiness. So this change, the composition of happiness actually changes according to urbanization. And this is it. Thank you. If you, I'm gonna keep my screen on if there are not sure questions, or if someone wants me to go back to a specific slide. And
well, Ale, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. It was super interesting. I really enjoyed it. And well, it was quite thorough. I think it was very, very clear. And well, there is a few questions here from the people that has been listening and attending your super presentation. And for instance, we have, how did you determine which happiness domains to consider in this study?
Yes, I mentioned that earlier. We are kind of limited, restricted in the happiness domain choice by the information that we got from the dataset. So this dataset has plenty of information. Of course, it would be desirable to have more than 7 happiness domains, but we are kind of limited by the information of the dataset.
Okay. Well, somebody commented it's because happiness is more simple to achieve in the countryside. Well, I think that has to do more with idiosyncratic factors, right? More like with cultural factors, more than what can be captured by the happiness function, for instance. But there is another question here. Homelessness is a problem that affects most, if not all, of urban areas. Was homelessness a factor considered in the study or not?
We do not have, this is a good point, but unfortunately we do not have that information. So it was not available because the data set is a sample of, and the observation are individuals interviewed. And whereas homeless is like we can think about it like a macro measure. So a measure like a city measure. So something that might be done could be to merge the individual information that we have with the urban information about homelessness. The problem with our data set is that we do not know, we know the region of residence, we know the size of the council in which an individual lives, but we do not know the council. So we do not know, for instance, the point is, suppose that an individual lives in Milan, and we can get information about homelessness in Milan. The problem is we do not know if that individual lives actually in Milan, or lives in Rome, or lives in Naples. Okay, so we cannot really merge correctly this information. But that is a good point. It would be better to have this information.
Okay. They're asking, our technical support is asking if we could stop sharing the presentation so we can see you actually. If you need to go back, it's fine. You can just put it back. Well, then homelessness is an issue apparently, but it's hard to catch. But I guess that it could be considered in a follow-up paper, for instance, if data permits, I guess. We have another one. It's not so much as a question, but more like, let's say, summary, just checking if they catch the idea properly, right? For instance, Maria is asking, I'm not sure if I captured this right. One, did you just run the model per type of urbanization? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you compare the results, coefficients per type of urbanization, or urbanization is just a dichotomous variable in which it has just two values, like, for example, rural versus urban. It looks more like it was this kind, that option two,
yes,
which is a dichotomous variable. However, I wonder if that is the case, would it be possible to apply option one, like to just run the model per type of urbanization? And if so, would that may give you a different result?
Well, I don't know. I don't have the results here. We run a different measures. The problem is, as I said during the presentation, there is not a standard way of doing this. A rural-urban dummy measure is one of the standard ways. Another way could take into account, I mean, if we want to think about measures that are being applied to in the literature, another way would be somehow consider the population size. So we haven't tried something that like the Maria suggests, and the results are qualitatively similar.
Okay. And for instance, we have another one. Agostina is asking us, are there any characteristics or internal aspects of family, for instance, family life, that you consider to have the most impact on satisfaction?
No, because we haven't checked for that. No, I mean, yeah, it is kind of out of the scope of the analysis. So we consider it as kind of standard socio-demographic variables without entering too much into the, I mean, the data set has many specific information about how much people go to the cinema, how much people go to the library, many questions also about family life. We wind up with this because I think we tried something, but they were not many significant. Or I have to remember. To be honest, I can't remember properly, but we ran a different with different estimation, and the information we got, we had, were not particularly relevant. But I don't know if Agostina had specific variables in mind. And to be honest, I can't remember the information apart from sporadic questions that I remember. So I'm not sure I can be helpful on this.
Okay. Then Maria again. Maria is asking, I didn't see in the literature review something about the happiness domains that are valid to measure happiness. Is that something you validated by yourselves? I mean, the domains included in the data set are the ones available, but are they the right ones?
The right ones? What?
Yeah, I said, I guess that what she's asking is that you validated yourselves with the data, the happiness domain. But how do you distinguish if the happiness domain is the correct one?
No, the happiness domain is, I didn't validate in the sense that you get the information from the data set. So it is, you just take the measure and you have the measure. The happiness function is a quite standard instrument in psychology, and it is also used in in the economics of happiness, which is a behavioral economics literature. So you can find it in journals like Vivo or stuff like that. So the main contribution of that promotes this approach is a paper from Van Praag in 2003. Published in Vivo. So if I'm not sure I understood properly the question, so if it was about the use of the happiness function, it is being, I mean, it's something that I didn't make up, okay? It's something that is being applied from people who work on this field.
I guess that's where the question is going. If you constructed the happiness function, or if something that is widely used, or is something that is proposed in the literature, and if so, then you just applied it and you used your data set with something that is quite standard. It's like, for instance, say, using a Cobb-Douglas, right? The Cobb-Douglas exists and everybody knows it, and you just use it, right? It's not something that
exactly.
Right? So I guess that's pretty much where the question is going.
Yes, if you can call it innovation, is to employ the happiness function to investigate the mediating role of urbanization. So put the urbanization measure in the saying, let me say it roughly, putting the urbanization measure into the coefficient of each happiness domain. And in this way, we are able to see the effect that this has on to explain the marginal, somehow the marginal effect of the happiness domains on overall satisfaction.
Well, that's pretty much all that I can catch from what people ask in the media, in the social medias. And but I have a question. For instance. And this is more about intuition. I know that you apply this to Italy specifically, right? But do you have any intuition, for instance, if you were to compare, I don't know, any European country between European countries, or if you match, for instance, a Latin American country with an European country, or the US versus, can you expand the analysis to this? And your intuition tells you that you will have similar conclusions, or it will vary. If I understood correctly, Ale, the conclusion is that the more urbanized city you have, or settlement, happiness will have a negative relationship, right? Happiness will go down the more urbanized it is.
Okay, this what you just said is kind of the results that you have in the Waller literature. The specific result I've got is that the more urbanized is the area you live, the more your happiness is due to, for instance, your economic conditions or your family, whereas the less is due to the environment, for instance. To go to your question, there is an European dataset that might compare with information on happiness on different European countries. The problem is it doesn't have information on happiness domains. So usually the information of happiness domains are country related, and this is done in different ways. So for instance, if you take one of the most important I don't know about very relevant data set, the BHPS for the UK. It has plenty of information on different happiness domains, but it's built differently from the HADL, and it has less information than the HADL, less happiness domains. So it is impossible to merge on different countries. Usually these analyses are done on using specific data sets that do not consider. So it is not so obvious how to the specific feature. But your point is correct. The specific feature of Italy is the large variability, the regional variability. So this is something that other countries have less. For instance, in the metropolitan area in Italy are relatively few compared to other countries. The level of density is high in the whole country, and so this matters more than if I compare Italy to, I don't know, US, where people live many, the level of urbanization is much higher, and you do not have the population so spread all over the countries like in Italy. So your point is very good, but we do not have the information to look at that.
And finally, what would be the policy implications of these results? I mean, for policymakers, these results matter. Could they do something about it? Or is something that you might take into account how as a policy issue, for instance?
Well, of course, from a policy side, we can just take into account the regional differences. So that the fact that the regional variation entails that it is likely that a central policy for urbanization, central in terms of state, might not be a good idea. It could make sense to consider each specific feature of each region and with each degree of urbanization and is specific idiosyncratic features. So I know it's an extremely generic remark, but
no. But it's quite interesting because we never think in terms of, for instance, decentralized policy making, right? In which it's better, instead of having like a countrywide policy towards urbanization, it would be better to have a regional specific urbanization policies taking into account these kind of results, which validate the necessity of regional level policy making instead of centralized. Right?
Yes, that's correct.
I don't know, probably you did, but I don't know if I capture it or not. I probably had a lapse there. Did you control for age or demographic features? Yes, you did. For instance, if a population, if a settlement, if an urban area or a rural area is full of old people, let's put it that way, measurements should be different of a population, a settlement that has a lot of families with young kids, or young adults that don't have kids. I guess those make different results, right?
Well, just to specify, I controlled for age, gender, stuff like that, but these controls are individual and not aggregate, are not for area. And the problem, I go back to a previous question, unfortunately, I do not know where these people live. So I cannot really match the this individual lives in Milan, and then I match with the average age of Milan, for instance. So I cannot do this because I do not really know. I just know the region and I know the size of the council. And so this is also the problem in considering income. I might in the other paper we didn't have this aspect. You might find some information about income at aggregate level, and then you say something, but you cannot do that without knowing where these people live.
Well, as you can see, the more interesting something is, the more questions arise, right? If there were no questions, that means that two things happened. Nobody understood or it was not interesting. This was not the case for you. It was totally interesting and we did understand. So it's thank you very much, Ale. I think that's it for time. I'm really happy to see you. I know we have chatted before, but it's the first time that we share a professional setting. We were students together, we live a lot of stuff together, we live together and so on and so forth. But it's the first time that we actually collaborate as academics. And for me, that completes our friendship. And thank you very much. And
you.
I know that you also have some other very interesting things, for instance, on a sort of, I don't know if you're still doing some assortative matching stuff.
Yes.
So that would be excellent if you could just have another participation in a further date with something like that. I guess we will be delighted to hear about it. And there is one last question. I guess we can squeeze it, right? And it says, how is the data behaving? Do they have like a normal distribution, or there was some processing needed in order to make it normally distributed, or does it matter?
No, I mean, there are a lot of, not really, there are a lot of info, a lot of data, a lot of observations. So you basically have a kind of, by the, the central limit theorem, it works well, it works like a normal, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, thank you. So that's pretty much it. And Ale, as always, a pleasure. Thank you very much for having this chat with us. And well, finally, as a token of appreciation, I will let you have this by mail or through WhatsApp, but let me show you something. And this is on behalf of Dr. Ruiz that you already met at the beginning. Here it is, I think you can see it. It is a pleasure for us to just acknowledge Dr. Alessandro Tampieri as a distinguished participant in our seminar. So we will
thank you so much. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Ale. And we hope to see you soon again, lecturing us on something so interesting as this urbanization and applied microeconomics. All my best, and thank you to all that made this webinar possible. Muchas gracias a todos por el favor de su atención. Muchísimas gracias por sintonizarnos. Y bueno, recuerden que el próximo viernes también tenemos otra muy interesante intervención. Gracias y buenos días. Hasta todos.